Continuing on in the series about the best coffee grinders you can get in 2020, we wanted to take a look at two of the higher end options. The short, stout, 98mm class grinders that you can get on your counter now. The Kafatek Monolith Flat Max and the Levercraft Ultra, or if you're overseas and get it directly from China, it's from Mr. Zhang. So, both of them are using 98mm burrs produced by SSP. They use different geometries at this current time. The Kafatek is using the quote low uniformity burrs, and the stock option, at least when I purchased the Ultra grinder, was high uniformity. Again, low uniformity and high uniformity. To make sure that I'm clear, Eric at Levercraft can get you different sets of the SSP burrs. This just happened to be the recommended stock option that most people went with, at least in the initial order. So, both of them are small, compact, and full of power with the 98mm burrs. So, as a point of reference, this is a 98mm burr. This is one of the original Mahlkönig filter coffee burrs. This is from before the revision that they quietly slipped into the production line sometime around 2014 or 2015. There's never been a clear official explanation as to when they did change them, because there's been varying reports of what the change was and when they did it. To be more blunt, these burrs grind coarser than a stock EK or EK43S coming out of the factory do now, and it is thought that these burrs in particular are really the hallmark of really, really good filter coffee, and that something was lost in the transition to the new geometry that allowed for slightly finer grinding, right? So this is my perspective. So before we really start talking about the differences in the cup between the two, I'd like to set some standards as to how you know that my view is at least checked in some level against something else I can reference. As both of these are variable RPMs. In the Kafatek, the controller is right here. And on the Ultra, you've got the separate control box with the knob, and you can actually hide the box under your counter, behind an espresso machine, or even underneath the grinder if you would like to have it that way. So with the variable RPMs, that's adding another thing for us to worry about. We're the espresso obsessed. Another thing that we need to worry about fine tuning. So this goes all the way from 100 to 1500 RPM, at least for 110 volt. And for the Kafatek, it goes all the way up to 400 RPMs. So for all of the tests that I did, really set at just 400 RPMs. Why? So back whenever I did get this grinder in March, I still had my EK43 at home that had these bad boys in them. So I'd had it at that point over 3 years every day drinking filter coffee and espresso. So I had a very clear image in my mind of what this distinct burr geometry produced in the cup, both for filter and for espresso. So using that as a benchmark, I actually swapped out the low uniformity burrs in here at one point with these. And for most of the year, I've used this primarily as my main filter coffee grinder, just with EK burrs in it. So the EK spins at about 1500 RPM, and this is only about 400 RPM. Most people would think that there's going to be a crazy difference in the cup, right? Well, I really don't think there was. After drinking from this exact burr set every single day for over 3 years at home, I have a pretty good mental map as to where flavor and clarity and body, all of those things should intersect in the cup. And there was no tangible difference at the 400 RPMs. I'm not discounting that RPMs can be impactful. It very much does change the relative grind size in terms of behavior. For instance, with the Ultra, I started pulling shots at about 1000 RPM, and I had to go quite a bit in a different direction to make sure that I could still get the same flow. But how much is the RPM change actually affecting the cup? My point is that I don't think it does nearly as much as some people would maybe expect. I am not discounting that there's an actual difference in the quality of the grind. What I'm talking about is maybe it's less than 5%, if at all. I didn't think there was a difference in the cups from this bad boy at under a third of the speed. So, with that out of the way, this is actually the second set of the low uniformity burrs that I have in here. The first set I sold because from my own preferences, I really preferred this set. So I sold my old EK, sold the burrs that came with this, and had the EK burrs in here most of the year. So I actually was able to borrow a set of the same burrs. So it's now the second time that I've had the low uniformity experience across a wide range of coffees, multiple espresso machines, and just different points of reference with all of the grinders that we do have here. Now, what about the high uniformity? So this is the high uniformity. Did I have the high uniformity in here or in the EK? No, but I found out that I actually used to drink high uniformity coffee. So, a story. Before coronavirus hit and we all had to really scale back on the time we would spend in our outside coffee shops out in the real world, I frequented a shop that was a fairly new addition to the local scene here in Pennsylvania, and they pulled EK shots. So I would go in and talk to the baristas and ask some questions and about the coffees, get suggestions, really try to taste what they're providing to the customer base outside of maybe the espresso obsessed like me. And I always remembered thinking that the shots were very soft, sweet, gentle, very palatable, and always always drinkable. I mean, I can always remember the number of times an espresso at a shop you want to throw out. None of these I ever wanted to do that for, which was high praise. I always thought those shots tasted slightly weaker than I would have expected, and I ascribed this to being a mixture of several factors, mainly the ratio. I think that they were using a tighter ratio than I really prefer to use than for espresso on these. Like a longer shot with these EK Burrs, about 1 to 3. You could get consistently in the 23% extraction range and up with this set. So I figured that they had tried to prioritize the actual volume over maybe expanded flavor, and I'm okay with that. Everybody likes a different thing. Second thing is a lot of the coffees were centrals, and I really prefer to almost exclusively drink washed Ethiopians and Kenyans and Panamanians, Colombians, things that I wasn't really drinking all the time. So the final time that I went in before the crisis, I was able to actually taste the same roasted coffee that I had at home. I get my green from Sweet Maria's and they buy theirs from Coffee Shrub, and I was able to taste the same exact thing. So I had a very clear reference point then that my assessment had been correct in terms of what I thought the general profile was, at least for the high uniformity. And I wasn't so impressed that I thought I had to run out and go buy the set. I mean, I was then cued into the fact that they'd had about $1,000 in upgrades to the grinder, and I never would have suspected that otherwise. I didn't think that it really tasted like an EK shot I had at home. I just thought that they were pulling it a different way. I didn't necessarily think that it tasted better. I absolutely understand why, for the palatability of each of these shots, they were all good. And I mean, it made sense from a workflow perspective. And, the high uniformity burrs do seem to have a bit wider range in terms of the sweet spot. I definitely will say that right off the bat. So I understand why it's there, but I didn't think it was the end all be all. Because again, its flavor is about preference. So in terms of differences between the two grinders, obviously there is a bit of a wait to get them. You can't just call up Prima Coffee or Seattle Coffee Gear, any other distributor you might have in your country, and just say, hey, I want one of these grinders. You've got to get on a wait list. So it can be very, anxiety ridden trying to make a decision as to which way you should go. And hopefully this could provide some clarity. However, Dennis at Kafatek is going to be making his own burrs, and the new ones start shipping in December. I don't want to speak on behalf of Dennis, but I would definitely say that what I'm going to say here about the flavor from this grinder, please expect to not hold true with any production model that is starting from the December 2020 release. The notes that I'm going to talk about here are really from anything that was from the original run in 2018 all the way up through today in 2020. So the low uniformity burrs made a more traditional espresso in the sense that there's an elevated body compared to, say, a filter grinder or an EK specifically, and you lose a little bit of the clarity and get a little bit of a bump in the body. The high uniformity tends to go the other way. You have almost no body whatsoever, again, compared to what you would expect in espresso, but you were able to get an incredibly clean cup. The flavors are so focused, almost as if you've removed all other distractions and all of the flavor is just coming right into your cup, and that sweet spot is very, very wide at a variety of extraction yields, all the way from low gold cup to way above it, something in like 23, 24, 25% yields. The flavor profile is generally the same. You still have a very, very focused flavor. You're able to get those high yields, and what's really great about this, in my opinion, is that you could pull a pretty tight shot relatively, and that for me is 1 to 1.5, and you can have a full flavored shot that you could put in a milk drink, you could take straight, or have with a sparkling back of water, and you're going to pretty much enjoy whatever it is. This is definitely more at this current time with the SSP low uniformity burrs. Is a grinder that for me really excelled at 1 to 2 and tighter. Didn't like really actually either of these at 1 to 3. This one performed a little bit better at 1 to 3. I'm not really sure what the difference was. I think that this almost makes it too strong when you start diluting the drink too far out with so much water going through the puck. And this really excels at some shorter shots, but I don't think that for at least my flavor preferences, I didn't like these shots to be as tight as these. This had a bit more of the traditional blending that you might expect from a regular espresso burr, something that's really going to mix up the different particle range to get a bit of powderiness and a little bit of body into the cup, and this has none of that. That said, I do not think that the high uniformity burrs taste like EK43 burrs, and I think that this is a key distinction that I would like to hear more about online. I see a very common thing for people to do now, and when I say very common, the sample size may be a couple dozen, if that, of people that are buying an EK43 and immediately going, you know what, I'm going to also spend money on a revised carrier. I'm also going to get these high uniformity burrs. We're going to slap it all together and just ship off the original set without tasting them. I think that that's a mistake. They are not the same flavor profile, really at all. I mean, when I say that these are clear, it's almost like the EK style taken to an extreme. The question is that really what you want? If you don't like EK43 espresso to begin with, you're not going to like the SSP high uniformity burrs that you get in this stock. I would suggest you get a different set, whether that is the low uniformity or some of the other geometries that may come out down the line, or maybe even regular EK burrs. I think that that's going to be the best set of options for you if you're looking to, get into one of these two grinders. Which one do I like more? Well, I like both of them. They're incredibly quiet. An EK43 is like turning a buzzsaw on in your kitchen, and it would wake, whoever your partner is or people in your home, a family member, child. You're going to wake them up if you turn that thing on. You're going to have some very, very well-rested people if you have one of these in your home, because they're the two quietest grinders I tested out of any that I had in the home. This is a touch louder, and I'm not really sure why. I think it comes down to the motor. Oh, there's no gear. There's a gearbox in this motor. There isn't in this servo motor. So the Ultra actually was so quiet that I would have to be careful to not walk away for too long without turning the power off, because it will continue to run, and it's so silent. It's almost as if you have if the difference between a vibe pump and a rotary pump is very great, I would say that this is greater than that gap, even with these two units, and they're the two quietest ones we've ever had. This is almost more like the vibratory pump, and by the way, it would be the quietest vibe pump you've ever heard. And this would be a rotary pump, but this might be conflating too much of the noise and that you associate with the whirring with how quiet they are. Both of them are incredibly quiet, and I don't think that there's a meaningful difference in terms of an impact in your indoor environment from one or the other. I just want to highlight that there is a real difference, and I really couldn't believe just how quiet this thing can get. Outside of that, they're beautiful. I mean, we've got these short, small grinders that can finally fit on your counter instead of some garish, big, bulk bag grinder that's going to sit on your counter. The fins on this remind me a bit of an Anfim grinder or even of a Techniform Mocha Master, just with those lines. So if you have an item like that on your counter, this probably is going to match. I tend to like the more shaved off, smoother look of the Kafatek, but that's more because I'm a minimalist in general. So, more to come. This is really just an overview of these two head-to-head, since I know there have been so many questions about what are the real differences between these two top-end contenders, and hopefully this was able to provide some light, at least in terms of a cup snapshot in 2020. Thanks for tuning in, and please remember to like and subscribe. More videos will be continuing to come in this series. If I didn't address your question about either of these, please shoot me a note. There have been a lot of questions about all of the grinders in general, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting to them bit by bit as to not overwhelm the audience with too much. Thank you.